Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, episode 39. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois.
Our final episode of 2021, Sylvain. What a year.
Already. Oh, yeah. Our first full calendar year together, I guess, because we started, I think it was May of 2020. So it was a pretty interesting year, don't you think?
Well, and that's what we want to cover a lot in this is what we think, what you think were the top stories, the food stories. I mean, it was great. We had the opportunity to get together in person for our last episode. We might not have that opportunity for a little while after that.
Unless we're all in a bubble.
Unless we're all in a bubble.
It's incredible what's going on. It's this wave is starting probably at the worst time for everyone, just around close to Christmas, and people had plans, and it's unfortunate.
Well, in fact, at our last podcast episode, the week on the Friday, I got a note from the club saying that they had a COVID exposure and they were closing the club for a couple of days.
That's right. Yes.
And it was a very vague announcement. It was like, we had one last week. So I'm like, what does that mean? Because you and I were there on the Tuesday. And I'm like, what does that mean? Right. So I actually did some detective work and found on the Toronto Health that there was actually a precise time, which was Sunday night. So we were fine, but it's like a close encounter, right? I mean, it's more close than I want to be with this whole COVID stuff. So I think we're in for some trouble.
Well, honestly, when I got your note, we have self tests, COVID tests at home. Did 2 tests over 3 days. I was fine. Did a PCR test yesterday. I'm fine as well. So everyone's good here. So we're good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here in Ontario, here's my box of tests. They gave them out at the LCBO, which, on one hand, you go to a liquor store to get your test, but it is government owned. But it was just a bit of a schmozzle because I think they got ahead of the LCBO's distribution. So they said they're available now, and the LCBO goes, "We don't have them yet. They're like at the distribution center." So it was a bit of a, they were there the next day and they sold out in 5 minutes. Not sold out, they were giving them away. So I bought some.
Them away, yeah.
And the idea, I guess they're going to order more, and I think that's a big part of our lives. Like our next episode, when we come back in mid-January, is actually I wanted to get into predictions for 2022, and I'll give you a foreshadow. My prediction is our lives are going to be these tests, like every day, no matter what you do, you're going to be taking a bunch of these tests to just
as soon as you see someone,
life, right?
You're going to test yourself. Yeah, absolutely. And case counts aren't going to be as relevant anymore. I don't think the public counts, like whenever they announce 3,000 cases, 4,000 cases, we already know now that these numbers aren't necessarily accurate because a lot of people are self-testing.
Well, and we also know that their meaning is less. Like, depending on if you're double vaxxed, triple vaxxed, the impact may be less. Exactly. It becomes how many people are hospitalized. None of it's fun. None of it's great. But I think we're in for some more chop in 2022. But I think we're better able to handle it. We got tests. We get this. We get that. But whatever. Now, also, let's move on from all that COVID stuff. In this segment, we have our Trying Stuff segment with Just. Check this out.
Yes,
I have the packages here.
That's right. Yes.
Two formats, Just Egg. And I have to say a little preview. The Just Egg plant egg comes frozen. You pop it into your toaster for 7 minutes. I love it. I've been buying them ever since we did the review because I just love it. I put a slice of lactallus cheese on it. And it's like an egg McMuffin. It's delicious. So I'm very happy with that.
Formats they have a very convincing approach, I must say. And this company reached out to us and sent us some samples. And so we'll hear more about our reviews. But I was intrigued first. And then, of course, my family tasted it. And they were in for a big surprise for sure.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about it more in the segment. Reminder to listeners that we have a YouTube channel, the Food Professor Podcast. Check that out. Lots of content, including Sylvain and I doing our Korean mukbang. Mukbang where you eat on camera, and so that's our version of mukbang.
That's right.
For trying stuff. All right. Well,
I haven't heard that term in a while. Mukbang.
Mukbang. Yeah. That's what we do. our version of it anyway. So I
That's
wanted to
right.
start off this episode with where we left off. So last episode was not entirely, but a lot of focus on Canada's food price report. So that was released like literally the day we did our podcast. So tell me,
Yeah.
what was the reaction? I mean, last year it blew up and lots of people focused on it. How was the reaction this year? One of the things I noticed, as you said, you weren't in front of the camera as much. A lot of your people were there doing a great job of speaking to the results. So what was your
Oh
impressions of
yeah.
the campaign?
I'm fortunate enough to have a really good team, and we have some
Mm,
great partnerships with the University of Guelph, the University of Saskatchewan, and the University of British Columbia. Their contributions were significant this year. It was great. And The day of the release, I was actually at a conference in Banff, and so I was busy. And I did all the morning shows, the main morning shows. But after that, the team took over and they did a fantastic job. We received, I believe, we received over about 150 requests on release day, and
wow.
we weren't able to answer all of them, obviously, but I think most of them were answered because we had so many people giving interviews. So it was great, and the market reach this year was over 550 million people. In other words, Michael,
Wow.
most Canadians have actually heard of Canada's food price report. If you watched the news that night, it was probably the number one or number two stories on most not networks. So we were pleased with the release. Obviously, it was not great news because we were
Right.
announcing higher prices for 2022, but the report really is filled with a lot of nuggets, a lot of different things
Mm,
beyond the
hmm.
forecast. The forecast is really the hook, but there are other issues that we address in the report, and hopefully people will read the report fully over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think if anyone might hesitate to read the report thinking they're just going through a bunch of tables and charts and of numbers, it's just the opposite, really. As you say, it's a very fulsome report with lots of great insight and writing. And I mean, what I got to thinking more about was the impact of the restaurant. I by the way, went out to dinner at our friend Carl Heinrich's Richmond Station
Oh,
this week.
okay.
So a friend of mine was in town. He said, "Where can we go that's safe?" I said, "Well, Richmond Station. I haven't been there. Carl says hello, by the way. So I ran in.
Ah,
Carl was there,
so
and
he was there. He was there.
he was there. It was a busy night. Everybody, of course, had to show their ID, their vac status to get in. And talking to the people who work there, they're like, this is a job for me. So as not everybody in all restaurants mandates or even wants their employees to be vaccinated, whereas everybody there pretty much is because it's a full-time job and it's
That's
just a
right.
different vibe. Anyway, the food, by the way, you and I have to go next time we're in Toronto. The food was amazing. Richmond Station, and just for the reminder to the listeners, their hospitality included.
That's
So
right.
tips,
No
there's no tipping,
tips.
no tips. Don't want tips. The price is the price. And my guest, who was over from the UK, was like, "Wow, these prices seem high." I'm like, "Oh, the tips in." He goes, "Oh, okay, that makes
Were
sense."
you tempted to give a little extra for because of the holidays,
Habit,
and
no, just
you
habit.
felt generous?
Not because I felt generous, but because it's habit. Like that's
It's
a
a
hard
habit,
habit to
yeah,
break. Like they hand me the machine, right? And I'm like, "Where's the 18, 20, 22%
yeah,
option?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, tips already included." So, and yeah, the service is great. My server was wonderful. The people were great. Food was amazing. But I think that's again, we'll talk about the future in 2022. But anyway, great
yeah.
report. I thought about restaurants a lot. I thought about you and that as we were sitting in Carl's restaurant. So
So
let's turn our mind.
did you feel that menu prices were, say, adjusted due to inflation? Did you see a difference?
Well, I mean, it is a bit hard for me because I haven't gone to many restaurants really, like
We've
over the
gone
past
to a
few years.
few, to be honest with you, over the last
Yeah,
couple of weeks, and I've
it's
seen a
still higher.
difference. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, menu prices have gone up already,
yeah.
and yeah, so I'm not surprised, and I wouldn't be surprised if Carl adjusted, some of his prices as well.
I guess what it means, one of the things I noticed the thread of conversation about the report was, have is the era of cheap food over? And
Yep.
I guess in relative sense, having you and I discussed that a lot, our food prices, even at the higher range, are still quite economical. They're still good value for what we eat, even with the inflation
I would
that
say
we
so,
have.
yes.
So I guess it's all relative, right? I mean, ultimately, I think people are more knowledgeable about the industry, and they're like, it doesn't make sense that nobody, that they have to, back to our Corey Mintz interview, that they have to have, people working for free to just, keep the lights on in restaurants. It doesn't make sense. The industry just doesn't work. So maybe I will have to pay more to eat out, and maybe I'll be more choosy. I think to me, it gets to this more conscientious consumption theme that I've been thinking about for consumers. They might not necessarily spend more or less, but they may spend less often and make more
Yep.
choices. Maybe I won't eat out 5 times a month. Maybe I'll do twice, but I'll be more choosy.
Yeah, and when you see uh, when you see a market spending or investing more on food, they will value food more. There's
Oh,
no
that's
doubt
interesting.
there. Yeah, absolutely, and so your perception or your relationship with food will also change. So I've always believed that food prices are quite reasonable in Canada, despite higher food inflation rates. And of course, we look at food prices all the time. When the shift is severe, like it is now, of course, you will see people fall behind. I've always argued that food prices aren't necessarily the problem; wages are the problem. And when you
Yeah.
look at food affordability in Canada, you can see that slowly Canadian households are falling behind.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the troublesome part of it for sure, and lots of people who are, having to make sacrifices because of the high cost of food.
Well,
Um.
if you're not
mm,
aware, Michael, the United Nations actually does have, along with the Economist, the well-known magazine, they actually rank countries based on food affordability. And Canada ranked 18th in 2020. Now it's down to 24th. And
huh.
my bet is that Canada will actually rank even lower. And food affordability will look obviously at food prices, but it also looks at wages as well.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, interesting. I mean, what's the key drive? I mean, what are the key drivers in that? The accessibility of food, where food's available, and I guess
Well,
where and how
food
the wages are,
security,
right?
there are three pillars to food security. There's access, safety, and affordability. So they look at all three. When you look at affordability, safety, Canada is actually number one, according to the UN. So we're doing
Mm,
great. Access, we're number three, which again points to the panic buying that we saw, which is, I think, ridiculous and irrational. Access
yeah.
is not a problem in Canada, but affordability is becoming a problem in Canada for sure. Despite the fact
I,
that
gue-
we are producing a lot of food, it doesn't necessarily mean it's actually affordable.
I guess we lose a few points for northern communities, right, where there's a little
Oh,
access.
absolutely. Yes.
Well, all right. I mean, that's the food price report. So, congratulations. It's a big body of work and very
Thank you so
influential. So,
much. Yeah.
congratulations. Yeah, it was good. I had lots of people say, "Hey, I saw your partner on TV," and I'm like, "That's my partner." So that was good.
There you go.
Uh, let Let's talk about looking back to 2021, and I wanted to get your thoughts for this episode on what you thought the top 10 big stories were that occupied your mind. I guess it's all colored by COVID, which is either an accelerant or a creator of things. But overview, when you look back at 2021, if you and I were on an elevator heading up to somewhere and you only had a minute or two to describe 2021, what would you say?
In a nutshell, from food inflation to TimBeibs to supply chain woes to the Suez Canal, and even Danny DeVito and Nabisco, that would sum up 2021 for me. What about you? You saw my list, but we'll probably go through it. But I certainly would want your opinion on the list that I prepared for you.
Well, I think you nailed a lot of the things that. I mean, if I was to boil it down to three, it's the acceleration of trends because of COVID. It is
Yep.
the creation, and that's all kind of things. That is, Tim Beebs is not. That's a very fun story. It actually but it actually captures the revitalization of Tim Hortons brand. So I think
That's
they're doing
right.
a much better job as a brand, with their place in. I think they lost the script a little bit for a few years, and they lost their place
Yep.
in the hearts and minds of Canadians. And I thought it was genius and well executed, and apparently they're good. So I think that was nice. I think what was different about 2021 clearly was COVID, whether it's the supply chain dramas, whether it's food insecurity, a little bit of, taking it less for granted, as you said. So I think, in my mind, then the industry stuff, the really how we think about how the relations between brands and retailers works.
Yeah.
And, it's not like there wasn't stress or opportunity pre-COVID, but obviously COVID put a lot of stress. On the one hand, put a lot of stress, and on the other hand, the demand shot up, right? 2021 was the cementing of volumes. And Michael Medline said this, I think, in his release about his numbers. He said, we're thinking that even though food service is open, there's a lot of Canadians who are now cooking more at home. And that, I always try to sift through temporary changes that are just adjustments to unusual circumstances versus structural changes. I think a structural change is more work from home, but more work from home has an incredible impact on the food service industry. I mean, the breakfast hour and the lunch hour.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
That's why I've always looked at that metric very closely, because I think even early on in the pandemic, I remember being on a few panels and people were saying, oh, we're going to go back to how things were. No problem. People will be working in their offices. I mean, we're almost 2 years into this pandemic, and you can see already that the marketplace won't look the same. It won't look the same. People will be working in different places.
And I guess, actually, I just came off an interview myself on the other side of the mic with Susan Kransky from the Globe and Mail, talking about, these kind of things on retail. And I said, listen, there's a lot of people, and it applies to restaurants and food service. Can I still make money on 66% of the crowd? So, if you rely on commuters, office workers, and maybe some tourists, can you still, and there's a school of thought that says when people go back, that they'll take those special days and actually go do all that stuff. Like, I'm only in the office 1 or 2 days a week. I'm going to shop and I'm going to go out for lunch with my friends. I think that's a very sound bet. The question is, for all the restaurateurs listening, can you keep your business afloat on 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 days of good volume, and then nothing on the other days? Don't know. We don't know, right? We're going to have
absolutely. To see. There's still a lot of things that are in flux, obviously, because we're still not done here. But you can start slowly seeing what the picture will look like on the other side of the pandemic, for sure. Yeah. Well, and I would say that 2021 was really, yes, COVID painted a lot of the things that we're seeing or we saw, but the word that when I actually started to prepare the list for this show, the word that came up a lot in my mind, especially from a supply chain and labor perspective, is fatigue. I mean, the food industry, we have to remember, Michael, I mean, the food industry has delivered, executed, has made Canada food secure for 21 months now, despite Mother Nature,
formidable
floods,
challenge.
Pandemics, problems with supply chains. I mean, there's been a lot of issues, and still shelves are full. People have something to eat. We haven't had major challenges as we saw in other parts of the world. We have to really celebrate what the food industry has done over the last 20 months. It's been a miracle, really.
Yeah, it's a great point, because from the supply chain going sideways in the Suez Canal, which is
yes.
which is number 10. I mean, that raised just this awareness that.
Did you remember that the Suez Canal issue was actually in 2021? Because it only happened in March, which is a century ago now.
Which is a lot. But did you know that boat only got released in September, right? Like,
yes, that's right.
And that's happening actually on the coast, on the West Coast. So that boat that caught on fire with all those containers, and I talked to retailers, their stuff's on the bottom of the ocean. They're like, we're not getting that for Christmas. 110 containers fell off and, are gone.
Was it 110? Oh my God.
Wow. 110. And I talked random sampling. 3 retailers told me they had product on those containers and they're not getting that back. But the whole boat is still stuck. It's stuck in an insurance process. So nothing Nothing has
Yeah,
moved from that
the Suez
ship.
Canal obstruction lasted 6 days, but the investigation, everything else, lasted months and months and
Months.
months. And
Months.
I mean, the
Months.
costs, according to some experts, was $400 million an hour or something,
Yeah.
while the ship was obstructing the
Yeah.
canal. So it's just unbelievable. I think it really got people to think that global supply chains are fragile, and you only
Hmm.
need one obstruction to really create havoc, create some major issues.
Well, and I think I bet it's got many retailers and many brands rethinking their supply chain philosophies, because
Yep.
how do you make a supply chain more agile versus more buttoned down and cost effective? Because sometimes those two things don't match. Now, a big boat getting stuck in the Suez Canal or a boat catching on fire. I mean, these things are going to happen. That's not a COVID issue, really.
Yep.
Those things happen. Amazingly, those things happen all the time. But it just raised everyone's awareness
Oh
of
yeah.
I remember the early days of COVID. I was on radio explaining supply chain. People are like, what is supply chain that you're talking about? How does this even like doesn't stuff just
Stuff
show up on the shelf?
appear magically in stores, Michael. Come on.
I mean, the average Canadian doesn't doesn't care to know,
But I
really.
remember there were some criticism about just in time procurement, and I'm a big believer in JIT. To be honest, I've never questioned the model. And frankly, I think grocers know how to operate in Canada. So I never actually questioned their approach. The empty shelves was a moment in time. I mean, basically,
Yeah.
you saw one sector shutting down and seeing another sector absorbing that shock for a while, and that's
Yeah.
it. I think people have moved on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of moving on, let's take a
Yes.
break and let's do our trying stuff segment with our Just Egg. So let's give Just Egg a try. All right, we're back after just trying. I have to say that for the Just Egg, it is now part of my diet. I love eggs, by the way. Love eggs. I eat them all the time. Had one yesterday. But this is a very convenient, goes on an egg McMuffin with a slice of cheese kind
It
of thing, as I
is.
said. I like
Yeah,
it.
formats are pretty convenient, I must say. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not our only plant-based egg that we've actually reviewed in trying stuff, because we had Nabati made in Canada. It was different. The taste was different. I liked it too.
Yeah,
So I think it's an exciting and interesting category, and we wish them the best of luck. Now,
absolutely.
speaking of being an omnivore, let's talk turkey again. So, how many questions did you get this year about is there enough turkeys for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter? Like, it seemed to be the year of the turkey uncertainty. Is that
Yeah, a little
what do you
bit.
think?
Yeah, so it's on my top 10 list, number 6. This year, the word shortage was overused, I think. Just people looking for holes on shelves, wondering if we're running out. And there were a few things. Even maple syrup was actually making headlines for a while because we were going into our strategic reserve, and people learned that we had a strategic reserve. And I had reporters calling me and say, we have a strategic reserve in Canada. And I said, what's the news? I mean, it's been
Yeah,
there for many, many years. So what's the big deal? And so people got to learn more about what's going on. But the one shortage related story that caught my attention was related to turkeys, because turkeys is supply managed in Canada, and the turkey industry is pretty solid and very strong. And so we sell 2.9 million turkeys a year for Christmas in Canada. We're likely to be selling the same amount this year. But for some reason, some media, some journalists actually thought that we were running out. And I'm not suggesting that the system is perfect and all grocery stores have enough turkeys. Of course, once in a while you'll see
sure.
some
There'll
inventories
be,
being low,
so to
and of
speak,
course
there'll
the
be a run on.
producer.
So to speak, there'll be a run on turkeys. See what I
That's
did there?
right.
A
But
run on turkeys.
I mean, and the turkey industry acknowledged that their planning this year since April was a little bit different because they were expecting smaller gatherings and a bit of a demand shift. And so we are expecting smaller birds. Birds are more expensive too. But all in all, we shouldn't be running out of turkey. So number six, it made the number six on my list of stories of the year, just because I actually think it points to how sometimes people don't understand exactly how the industry operates, how it plans. And supply management is all about planning. We produce what we need, but the need part is a big question mark, especially during COVID.
Yeah. All right. So when I looked at our top 10 episodes of the year, our number one episode was number 1 and 2 episodes were all related to the same broad topic, dairy. Number one was Buttergate, and then number 2 was the CDC's Canadian Dairy Commission's
Was
increase.
it? Oh,
So
and that's number
very
5 on the
popular.
list of stories of the year. Yeah,
So
absolutely. So
so
the dairy. They're somewhat related, because the Canadian Dairy Commission obviously made history in November by announcing that farm gate milk prices are going up by 8.4%, which is almost double the previous record. That's a lot, and probably Canadians will start seeing that hit in mid-winter, February, March. Butter is going up 12.4%. That's probably due to Buttergate. The Canadian dairy farmers won't admit it. The CDC won't admit it either. But that's basically why, because once you stop using palmite, which is a palm oil derivative, it will increase your cost of production. But I think 2021 was a very good year for the dairy sector, I think, because people got to learn more about dairy production. And it really, those stories made the system more transparent and more accountable. And even though we're having some issues with the Canadian Dairy Commission to get access to primary data, which we won't have access to, unfortunately, because we did talk to the accounting firm responsible to collect data, we still won't be able to get access to primary data, unfortunately. So nobody really knows how they came up with the 8.4%, unfortunately. And that's something we're going to have to live with.
You did learn something new from my recollection, that the purging of dairy, or however they call it, is in the number. In other words, when dairy farmers have to throw away milk, that factors into the numbers, right?
I mean,
and you didn't think that was the case?
Even there, well, no, I think I knew it was the case, but dairy farmers themselves don't see it that way. And often I spoke to a lot of dairy farmers, and I always realize, Michael, a lot of dairy farmers don't even understand how supply management actually works. They don't understand what the CDC does, because really what they focus on is on making milk, which they're experts in making good milk for Canadians. That's what they do. But they don't necessarily understand the mechanics of the entire regime, which is understandable. But so when you tell them that Canadians pay for dump milk, they don't understand that, because they just see their revenues go down, but it's actually embedded in the cost. And of course, they rearrange quotas as a result. The other thing, of course, is the issue related to the survey itself. Dairy farmers can refuse to be part of the survey, which I didn't know, actually. I thought once the CDC, which is a Crown corporation, once you get the phone call, you have to participate in the survey, but they don't have to, which means the sample, like, who actually participates in this survey?
Right.
And what I was told by the accounting firm is that once they commit for 5 years. But who are they? Like, what size are these farms, and are they efficient? They say that they actually randomly select farms, but if they can refuse to participate, does it mean that we only get in the sample less efficient farms, and to increase farm gate prices? Is that how it works? We don't know.
What do you call that in your profession? Sample bias, right? That inherently, if you can opt out, then there's a bit of sample bias. I don't know which way it goes, but so let me ask you this question, just to close off on dairy. If you were a dairy farmer, would you have considered 2021 a good year?
No. Well, I think it was a good year, but I don't think dairy farmers thought it was a good year, essentially because they think about their image. They're very concerned about their image. And I'm more concerned about accountability and transparency. And for me, when you look at those two criteria, it was a good year for them. They may not acknowledge it, but moving forward, I think it's going to be a good year. But they do have a massive marketing budget of $150 million a year, so they can buy love. They're buying.
Mm,
I'm sure you've seen their ads now. I mean, they're everywhere. They're spending a
everywhere.
lot of money to make you forget about Buthergate, to make you forget about the fact that your cheese, your yogurt are about to get more expensive in a few weeks from now.
Well, let's talk about a different type of farmer, potato farmers on the great island
Number
province of
4.
PEI. Is that still? So I've actually lost track of it a bit. So the story was, we talked about a couple episodes that there was a bit of potato fungus. It was under control, but
It's a
then the government
wart.
stepped in and
Well,
said, "Thou shalt not export." And where do we sit with that?
I think when you look at that case, the year 2021 really reminded us yet again that science always take a backseat to trade politics. That's basically what it is. PI farmers, I feel for them. Potato farmers on the island are really upset. If you haven't followed the story, you haven't missed anything, Michael, because the problem is still there.
Huh?
So two farms had warts on potatoes. The CFI has protocols to follow, science-based protocols, but when politics came in, the minister basically should embargo only on PI potatoes to save the potato industry across Canada.
Mm.
But there's some rumors suggesting that perhaps something else is at play. For example, there's this issue about EV electric vehicles, the production of electric vehicles. It's not something I know very well, but there's a lot of different issues related to trades that sometimes impact food, and I think this may be one case, unfortunately.
It's very intertwined. It was the Biden latest campaign that actually got stopped in Congress, which might not necessarily be a bad thing for Canadians, because there was not just an EV substitute, but it was, you had to make the cars in America,
In America.
which went against CUSMA, because there's a
Yeah.
trade. So we would wound up but that's okay. It's not unusual for us to wind up in some adjudication process with our American
The
friends.
sad
So
thing is that we don't believe that this problem will be settled before New Year's, and if that happens, the industry may actually have to discard some potatoes, unfortunately. So we will lose
yeah,
some supplies. So it's just
yeah.
not a great. And frankly, this embargo. Once you put in an embargo against an island like that, like PI, it's hard to get rid of it. And so
Yeah.
basically, Ag Canada picked all other provinces over PI, and PI's reputation will
Mm.
be damaged, unfortunately.
Well, not with me. When I think of potatoes, I think of PEI. That's not going to
I
change.
do
So,
too, and they're
you
great.
know,
And
they're great
and if you
potatoes. I love my
can, buy some
potatoes.
for the holidays.
Yep. PEI potatoes. Love them if I can find them.
Yeah,
Last couple of things. We talked a lot about the food worker in
yeah.
2021. I got to think that, I know that made your list. And I guess from one part, it's, the COVID outbreaks, the strikes, the increase of pay, the need for technology and processing plants, all the way to the front lines of, how and where the grocery workers were the grocery heroes, hero for a day,
Yeah.
paid. What's your kind of thoughts around, is there anything that happened in 2021 that you see continuing on? I got to think these pay raises and people recognizing the work that goes on in these production facilities, I got to think that's another add to both the cost of the food, but importantly, these people are getting paid what they're
Yeah.
worth, right?
I think with 2020, people noticed that food workers exist, and they did gain
Mm,
political capital. In 2021, they actually uh, financially benefited from that gained political capital. I think that's basically what's going on right now. When you look at deals at Nabisco, Kellogg's, Cargill in High River, Alberta, Exceldor in Quebec, Holymel. I mean, they all got a lot of money over several years. But of course, most of these companies are now committed more towards robotics and automation as well. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
you're seeing really wages going up in the industry, which is great news for them. But obviously, over time, we are expecting more automation to change the industry overall. But the one thing that caught my attention in the United States was the fact that Hollywood great Danny DeVito actually was asked to become the spokesperson for Nabisco workers. And honestly, I don't know about you, Michael, but I've never seen a Hollywood actor being asked to advocate for food workers like that very openly. It was really interesting.
Yeah. The last thing I remember is maybe it was Woody Harrelson talking about the workers that come up from South America to pick all the fruits and vegetables in California, right? So
Yeah,
there's been a strong connection, I think, between Hollywood and the food workers who are kind of brought up. But you're right. I mean, it's raised to a new level. Now, speaking of raised to a new level, there's been a couple of comments when we make posts about, okay, everything you say is fine, but why aren't you talking more about climate change? Why are you talking about boats in the Suez Canal? Shouldn't we be
yeah.
talking about the big issue? So I saw, climate change, heat domes, all these things. They've got to have a
Atmospheric
big impact.
rivers. Oh
Yeah,
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 absolutely. So that number two on our list this year, that wasn't hard to pick in my view. I don't know about you, but really, I think what happened in BC in particular this year, if you're a climate change skeptic and you live in BC, there's something wrong with you.
Like, what's it going to take? Like, what's it going to take? Like flaming toads from the sky? Like, what's it
Oh
going to
my
take to convince
God.
you?
I mean, Linton at 49.6 degrees. That's insane. That's a lot.
Yeah,
So the heat dome in June, the atmospheric rivers in the fall, really
yeah.
it gets everyone. I hope it will get everyone to believe that our supply chains are vulnerable, but also, I mean, with climate change, we need to focus on, how do we make sure that agriculture and processing continues to remain competitive despite all the things that Mother Nature throws at us.
And what role can the choices we have at grocery store play in some small way? You know, choosing local versus whatever. That's not always easy.
Yeah,
We don't grow avocados in Winnipeg. Speaking of avocados, that was the top story for us.
that's right.
Um, so all these things come together. Now, number one in your list gets us all the way back to the beginning of the podcast, which is food inflation, right? So, from
Yeah.
your perspective, that's the most important story of 2021, right?
Were you surprised?
No, no, that's got to be the story.
I mean, I don't know if you have any idea of how many interviews I've given this year.
How many? How
I
many?
So just guess.
Now, it's
I
not
actually
fair because
log every week. I actually log the number of interviews every single week, French and English.
now it's not fair because you told me. I think you told me the total. It was like 1,100 or something, or 1,200. Was it?
So I'm right now as we speak. I'm at 1,210,
Wow.
1,210. Yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy, and I would say probably half of them were related to food inflation, at
Now, it's
least.
not unusual for the media to call you up for your expertise, but if you look back 3 years pre-COVID, you were in the media as well fairly often, but do you think there's more stories going on, or do you think the number of times people are calling you, obviously a reflection of your expertise, but obviously also a reflection of interest in the subject matter? Would you say yes?
I would say, well, I mean, the 2020 was my busiest year with media. I would say, but my second busiest year with media was this year, over the last 20 years or so. And the third busiest was probably 2019. So it's just getting busier. And frankly, I I enjoy working with media, to be honest, because I they I mean, they give me information.
Yeah.
If you play the game, they give you reporters know what's going on and they know what the public wants to know. And so, as an academic, it fuels our research because we get to know what matters to people. And so that's why we're very intimately related, or we work very closely with media, because they give us a lot of information. Yeah. And I
Well,
know
I mean,
you do too as well.
yeah, I look at it more for you. I look at it as a great thing because it pulls information out of academia and puts it into the public eye where it kind of belongs, right? It becomes a public good. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate, your contribution that says, well, we're doing all this great work and let's make sure that people understand. They may or may not agree with it all the time. I had to laugh. One of my favorite comments was from, you were on a panel with Michael Medline, and he says, hey, Sylvain, I agree with him 70% of the time, not 100% of the time. So,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
not
I mean,
bad
of
for Michael,
course.
right? 7 out of
So
10.
I had, oh, absolutely. So I had a column in the Toronto Star over the weekend, and on farmland management and what we should do with rural economies and things like that. Because I was arguing that over the next 50 years, having enough farmland should be the least of our concern, because of what's going on with dairy, with meat products, meat consumption. We're gonna have to figure out ways to populate rural communities. That's going to be a big problem, because a lot of people are actually either going into rural communities because they want to live there and have space and freedom, but not farm necessarily. So those are questions marks that I've raised in my article, and of course I did get a lot of positive comments, but I received negative comments as well, which I will not share in detail. But when you're actually out there in the media and you have an opinion, you should expect to get all sorts of reactions, of course.
I guess it's the Vox Populi peer review, I guess, so to speak, right? You're they're not your colleagues, or they're not in your profession, but the fact that they take the
Well,
time to say I
I must
disagree,
say, I mean, some of
interesting,
the
right?
emails I get, I'm not even sure the person is actually sober. So that's, you know, they're sent like at
Wow.
10 or 11 at night, and you go, oh boy, okay. And I don't reply.
Ah. Yeah. Wow.
If it's
No, no
positive, I
need.
will reply. I will thank them. But if it's
Yeah.
negative, I just, whatever. Yeah.
No, whatever. Well, all right. Well, listen, hey, a great episode, and we're back. We're taking a bit of a hiatus. We're back in the mid of January. We've got lots of great products for trying stuff. You can see some of them for those watching. You can see half of them on my shelf behind me. We've got Joanne Lebrec as our first guest to kick off the year, a real mentor of
That's right.
yours, I believe.
Yes, absolutely.
So she's got a tremendous expertise in all things like e-commerce and all that. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's, I think, on the 13th, January 13th. So we're taking a bit of a hiatus. We got lots of fun stuff planned for 2022. We'll also kick off with a bit of our predictions for 2022. It's good time to do it. So until then, make sure and smash that subscribe button, whether it's on your podcast platform or whether it's on YouTube, and keep up with everything we've got going on. We got lots of fun stuff coming in the new year. Savannah, it was such a treat, as always, for 2022 to spend time with you. Great to see you in person, actually, which is
Yes, absolutely. That was a bonus.
Extra super fun. And I guess it was very characteristic of 2022, right? We saw each other in person, then I had to send you a note that there was a COVID exposure. So there it is. Thumbs up. Thumbs up.
Merry
Sums up the
Christmas.
year. Yeah, Merry Christmas. Go get tested. Anyway, all right. Well, listen, I'm Michael LeBlanc, president of Maven Media Group, and also host and producer of the all-new Last Request Barbecue Show on YouTube. So check that out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Be sure to check that out. And you are?
Sylvain Charlebois, and I want to wish all our listeners happy holidays and be safe.